we are live. Welcome once again to Battle Tested History. I am your host, Jeff Thompson. With me, of course, is Scott Baker. Today we're going to discuss. Scott's frozen. At least he's
Yeah.
contemplative.
It's the NSA. They want to make sure I'm not revealing classified information.
Naturally. Today we are going to be discussing the horrors of trench warfare. Before we get there, a little bit of background information. Um, in the first place, the First World War was a complete waste. Complete waste. It solved nothing. It resolved nothing. It probably did more just to ensure we'd have a World War II than anything else up to and including probably Hitler. It was pointless. It was started by a bunch of men in funny hats who, I mean, King George of England, Tsar Nicholas of Russia, and Kaiser Wilhelm were first cousins.
Yeah.
They used to hang out.
It was like the Hatfields and the McCoy, but in Europe.
Yeah, but they were friendly at first. They were plenty friendly, but just that the idiotic stuff they were doing ensured that war would happen.
Yeah.
For example, well, England had the biggest empire by far.
Right.
And it gave them a lot of economic power because they could set their own price.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Germany had the smallest.
Yeah.
And they wanted more. So they decided that to get to grow their empire, they first needed a navy.
Mm-hmm.
So they started building ships. Well, England, who had the biggest navy by far, one of the biggest navies in all of human history, said, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to double the size of ours. And then they built the first dreadnought, which is better known today as battleship. So you had this escalating arms race going on for no apparent reason. I mean, they weren't at war. They just decided we're going to build a bunch of weapons.
Yeah. And then for the past 50, 60 years, every war in Europe was over in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
They'd don't go to war. There'd be one big battle. The winner would say, okay, I won. I'm going to take this little plot of land. And the loser would go skulking away. And then 10 years later, there'd be another war and somebody would win and they'd get their land back. So no one ever thought World War I was going to last 4 years.
No, or be as big as it was, which is on the surface of it was idiotic. And here's some numbers. Okay, there were 1 billion artillery shells, 1 billion of them. 1 million machine guns. 50 billion bullets. 65 million men at war. The Earth had never seen anything on this scale before.
No. And it was also a test run for World War II. It was the first use of tanks, the first use of machine guns, the first use of aircraft in combat.
Air reconnaissance.
Yeah.
Yep. That's very true.
Yeah.
And to give to the three movies that we're looking at today, and we're discussing trench warfare, but it didn't start at trench warfare. They didn't show up on a nice, convenient field and go, okay, I think we'll dig a hole and stay here for the next 4 years. It didn't start that way.
No.
Germany decided to invade through Belgium and into France. Well, Belgium was a neutral nation. They had nothing to do with it. They had no dog in this fight.
No.
But Germany decided to invade them anyway. That brought England into the war because England was an ally of Belgium.
Right.
And the German plan was to do exactly the same thing they did in 1870,
Yeah.
which was to encircle the French forces, take Paris,
Yeah.
call it good.
Yeah.
They take it 6 weeks. 6 weeks to be over.
Yeah.
Well, then came the Battle of the Marne and the so-called Miracle of the Marne. Because
Yeah.
at first the Germans were just kicking their asses. Both the English and the French were just kicking their asses. And then
As
the
they did
French,
20 years later.
as they did 20 years later, and then the French um, brought up, I got the number here, they brought up troops from all over France, and even 5,000 of them, 5,000 of them from taxi cabs out of Paris.
Yeah.
That's why they call
Remember
it
that.
the Miracle of the Marne. And let me see. Germany.
Well, it always amazed me that the Germans, who were so good, so precise, when they did the Schlieffen plan, they missed Paris. They went, rather than like overrunning Paris, they went to the east of Paris.
Yeah. So anyway, I wrote it down here somewhere. I thought I did, but oh yeah, 185,000. They brought 185,000 troops up. The Germans knew nothing about.
Yeah.
They had no idea they'd done it. So when they hit, all of a sudden it's just holy shit.
Yeah.
We got all these people battling against us. And they got knocked back. So they retreated north and then started trying to get around the end of the line, which was where the British Expeditionary Force was.
Mhm.
They just kept trying to get around them, and they got blocked every time. And finally, the Brits got to the town of Ypres, Ypres, which of course the Brits couldn't pronounce, so they called it Wipers. Yeah, so they got there ahead of time and dug in. And the Germans sent forward thousands upon thousands of completely rookie troops. And they got massacred. Next thing you know, Germany backs up to a reasonable distance, digs in, trench warfare has begun.
Yeah.
It eventually went from the English Channel all the way to Switzerland.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where it started.
Yeah.
So anyway, you care to take the first movie?
All right. Which one do we want to do first?
Let's
do the Somme.
The Somme. Yeah. The trench was boring to me.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't show, the trench didn't show anything about what life was really like.
No.
And it wasn't even like, oh, we're going to die tomorrow. It was more like drama between all the troops.
And they didn't even show the battle. They did, they kind of, at the very end of the movie, you see them going over the top, and that's it. So, but anyway, the Somme.
I mean, I watched the Somme tonight. Mm-hmm. It was a documentary made into a movie.
Yeah.
And it's it was really good. Great acting, and it told the whole story. Mm-hmm. That, the British decided that they were going to put in fresh units. They bombarded the German positions for a week. Mm-hmm. And then they were going to plan. They just figured they'd walk across no man's land and take the German positions. And
which on the face of it was just idiotic.
Well,
because
yeah,
the bombardments have never done what the military leadership has thought it should do.
Yeah.
It didn't work for Napoleon at Waterloo. It didn't work for Lee at Gettysburg.
No.
Didn't work for the English.
No. And they pointed out, like, the movie's very good. It's got maps. Mm-hmm. It's got details. It has actual diary entries from people who participated.
Yep.
And the British had these crappy trenches. They lived in them. It rained. They lived in mud. The Germans, being German, buried themselves 40 feet underground into cement bunkers. They rode out. I mean, it was maddening, but they rode out the artillery barrage. Plus, the artillery barrage, the movie points out that like so many of the shells didn't explode. They just hit and, they were duds. They didn't even rip up the last string of barbed wire before the German positions.
No.
And the Germans had just introduced machine guns into their positions. So the British are thinking, we're going to charge these guys that have been blown apart, that are insane. There's only a few left. We're going to run it. We're going to walk across. I mean, one of the officers actually says to his men, you won't need your rifles and bayonets. You can use your walking stick. He was trying to be positive. And,
he was blowing smoke up their asses.
Yeah. And one thing I liked about all three movies is they showed the British. Now, these British troops, most of them had never seen combat. Not a day in their life.
Right.
And there's there's films and pictures of them smiling and waving. They're thinking this is going to be a cakewalk. They're talking about we'll be home by Christmas. Boy, how many wars have we heard that in? Yeah. And when they started crossing the field, the Germans waited. And these guys are crossing the field. And then just as they got to that last strand of barbed wire, they opened up with the machine guns. And they just tore the British troops apart.
Absolutely.
And the commander, Rawlinson, he was like 4 miles back. He had no clue.
No clue.
I'm going to get myself into a lot of trouble with my British friends, but all I could think of when I'm watching Rawlinson was Montgomery.
Yeah.
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 And it's very good. It shows the horror of the war. It shows, it's very detailed about when the machine guns opened fire. The British troops just getting slaughtered. And there were, in one wave, there were 60,000 troops that went over the top. 30,000 were killed or wounded.
Yeah, in the first hour.
Yeah, within the first hour. And then I think the whole thing was, I think there were like 100,000 or 200,000 troops along the whole front went over.
Oh, the internet's a lovely thing. But yes, there were.
There were 60,000 casualties along the entire British front. And they managed the British took the two outlying portions of the field, the north and south, but got bogged down in the middle. And the
Brits couldn't even get all the way to the trenches in the middle. They got
battle lasted for 4.
Go ahead.
And when the battle was finally over, 1 million troops on both sides were killed or wounded. 1 million troops. I think that's the worst. I think that's the worst battle casualties. And the British wound up gaining 6 miles of territory.
Yeah. It resolved nothing.
It resolved absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
It just wasted 1 million young men on both sides.
Which, during the Second World War, that was a real problem that the Americans had to deal with when it came to the Brits. And again, we're probably going to get some snarky comments from our friends in the UK, but, Churchill and Montgomery and the rest of the British High Command were really reluctant to just go, like Patton did.
Yeah.
Patton just went. He said, to hell with your flank, go. Kill the Germans.
Yeah.
And his strategy worked. He was called a butcher for doing it, but it worked. Montgomery, no way he would do that.
Well, the Enigma machines told Patton and Montgomery what was in front of them. And Montgomery would say, okay, there's 100,000 German troops. I have to build up to 300,000, 3-to-1 odds, and we'll attack head on. And Patton used to say, like, okay, the Germans are here and the Germans are here. We're going to go right in between them.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, the Germans are like throwing their weapons down and trying to get out of the way before they got encircled.
Yep.
You know, and it was, the sad thing was, and I feel bad for the British military, they never learned the lessons of World War I.
No, they didn't, but their hesitancy was
Yeah.
because of the just insane amount of casualties they suffered during
Yeah.
that war.
Oh, yeah.
They lost almost an entire generation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, don't the British call it the lost generation?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's, they go into a little bit of the human suffering, and they go into it quite a bit in the Psalm. It's on Netflix. No, sorry. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a 2015 movie. Don't get it confused with the Psalm, which was made during World War I. I highly recommend it. It's historically accurate.
Yep.
You get to read. Tilda Swinton did the narrations for the nurse that was there, and I don't remember who the actor was who did the narrations for the troops. I learned. I know a little bit about World War I. I learned a lot about the battle. Just watching this movie.
Yep. The only criticism I would throw at that movie is that it didn't really show what life was like. I mean, it sort of did, but it didn't. I mean, you had the nice pristine grass field and the flowers. Bullshit.
Yeah.
By that point, they'd been lobbing shells at each other. So, yeah, that
1917 did a much better job showing how it sucked to live in those trenches. But I think this movie, the Psalm, did a better job in expressing the emotional and psychological trauma both the Americans and the Germans went through than that crap on the trench.
Yeah, that was a pretty bad movie. But like we were talking about last time with Gettysburg, what these generals were asking the men to do, and this was the same throughout the war, was insane.
Yeah.
It was absolutely insane, and they did it anyway.
Yeah. But at least when Lee said go across, they knew what they were doing. They could see the enemy lines. They knew they were going to get their asses kicked. These poor British soldiers were led to believe this was going to be a cakewalk. They were going to walk in, jump in, pick up souvenirs, go to the second trench, pick up souvenirs. They had no clue there was even a third trench.
Yeah. And with Lee, the Confederate soldiers had a solid, proven commander. He'd given them victory after victory after victory.
Yes. Yeah.
The Brits and the French, they weren't winning shit.
Now, Rawlinson, from what I got from this movie, was not a good commander.
Yeah, the only reason we don't know more about him, I suspect, is that Haig, who came later, was even worse.
Yeah.
Was even more of an idiot.
Yeah.
He slaughtered people left and right.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was... I don't... World War II, I could have fought in that war. World War I, Civil War, I'm like... freaking way.
The one thing that gets me is I understand that the French, after World War I, built the Maginot Line across the entire border with Germany. The idea being is there's got to be no trench warfare. You've got to break through this. And I've seen the Maginot Line. It is massive. And yet nobody bothered to think, armor? No, those were for reconnaissance. Nobody remembered World War I. How did the Germans invade in World War I? Belgium. How did they invade in World War II? Belgium. Well,
it was Belgium. They feinted toward Belgium and then went through the Ardennes. So they kind of
Yeah.
They did the old 1-2 punch.
Yeah. And then they did the same thing in 1944, and we fell for it.
Yeah, exactly. And the Maginot Line itself looked great on paper.
Oh yeah,
But essentially all it was trench warfare with better accommodations.
yeah,
It was a fixed position.
yeah.
It didn't allow for movement, especially
No.
after seeing what the Germans did in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
That blitzkrieg was astounding. It astonished the world.
Yeah.
But they learned nothing from it.
No. Well, that's something like one of my history professors said. The problem with the American military, we are the best trained, we've got the best equipment, we've got the best commanders, and we always fight the previous war.
And we are always fighting the last war.
Yeah.
Instead of this war.
Yeah.
And there you go. Scott, no.
Oh, I'm here this time. I don't know if you people can see me. I'm still here. If you can see me and not Jeff, definitely, it's free on Amazon Prime. Definitely worth the watch. I really enjoyed the movie. I watched it today and I rewound numerous scenes to rewatch again. They were so good. Hang on a minute. Oh, I think it was Jeff that was frozen. He'll be back in a second. I'm interested. I'm curious, especially any of you from Great Britain or from the Commonwealth who are watching it, Canadian, Brits, Scots. How is World War I portrayed in British history, in British textbooks? I'd just be curious because I know, we talk about the insanity of it, and then when the Americans joined, their first big fight was just exactly same. It was a slaughterhouse for the U.S. Marines. So anybody out there, I'd love to hear your take on World War I and the battlefields and trench warfare. Hang on a minute. All right, I'm just waiting for Jeff to come back because it's his show. The other movie we were talking about, we watched, but we're probably not going to talk about it much, is The Trench. Okay, I'm here. Jeff is back.
Yeah, we both lost it at once. I can't believe that.
Oh, well, I was still talking. I was still on. So I'm like, I think we lost Jeff again. I'm still BSing my way through this. Okay. I don't know which one of us you hear. So if you're hearing me, the third movie that we watched for today's show was The Trench, made in 2020. It was supposedly the life, what it was like to live in the trench prior to the battles. And it was a major disappointment. It was no different than every World War I movie I watched in the 30s and 40s. It was mud, it was rain, it was crappy rations. They didn't go into any of the stuff like the rats, the boredom, the sickness, the trench foot, all of that stuff. It was a drama. It was a bunch of guys chatting about each other and getting into fights right before the eve of the Battle of the Somme. And it really wasn't that good because...
Jeez, I can't believe we just out here. Maybe it's 110 freaking degrees out.
Oh, jeez.
So that might be an excuse as to why it's happening in Vegas. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know about yours.
here it's nice. It's in the 70s. It's cool at night, but tomorrow we're going to get hit. So, no, I was just talking because I'm up and running, so I was just mentioning how bad the trench was.
Yeah, it was a shitty movie. That's a fact.
Yeah. The best of the three movies. I think we both agree. 1917. Go ahead.
Well, 1917 is about two British corporals who were tasked with getting a message to one of the forward units to stop them from making an attack that they'll lose. They'll get massacred because something has happened in the German trenches they're not aware of. They thought the Germans were retreating and they weren't. It was a trap. And apparently, according to the movie, the phones were tapped so they couldn't contact them directly from command, which communications were always a problem in the First World War because they had hardwired telephones. They weren't really using codes. The Russians, particularly, when they attacked Germany first, at first they were kicking ass and taking names, but they were also broadcasting in the clear with no codes. So the Germans were going, they're doing this, they're doing this. And they discovered that one entire army had gotten cut off from the other one. So they surrounded it and just decimated it. But yeah, apparently the phone lines were always getting cut. They were always breaking down. It wasn't a reliable form of communication. But that's the basic gist of it. And it's the story of those two crossing no man's land. That's essentially it.
Yeah. I did a little research on this movie. Historically, it's bad. Because there was going to be an attack. The Germans had retreated to the Hindenburg
line. But it got called off safely. That wouldn't be good for a Hollywood movie, so.
All right. And the Germans, the British didn't realize that they were going to walk into a trap. But the guy who reviewed the movie said there is no way that the British, they'd send the forward unit up first with the right main force 6 miles behind. It was done that way. But the movie was directed by Sir, I can't remember his first name, Sir Mendes. He based the movie on his father, who was a messenger in World War I. And even though the historical parts of it are bad, everything that the father had witnessed, going through the trenches, the bodies just laying there, like the scene when they jump in the trench and his hand hits the body and it breaks open and the rats came out. All of that is historically accurate. This is what the father told the director, and the director wanted to make sure that, like Saving Private Ryan for World War II, people would understand what it was like to be there in the trenches and in no man's land during World War I.
Yeah. My grandfather drove an ambulance for the American Army during World War I. And years later, I saw my dad, actually after my father died, I saw the pictures my grandfather had taken. Naturally, there weren't any bodies or nothing, but it showed the trenches. And it was deplorable.
Yeah.
Even this is the Americans. They didn't come around till like almost 1918.
Yeah.
They got there at the end of 1917.
Yeah.
And it was just as bad for them as it was for the French and the English.
Yeah.
You'd have thought, especially since they had taken some German trenches. Because you thought that this is all the Germans, this looks great.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yes, Guns of August. Albert is absolutely right. Excellent.
No,
book.
I've got the book. I've never read it. I got to read it sometime.
I've read parts of it. I haven't read all of it yet. But it's mentioned in the movie 13 Days. Kennedy is talking about it.
Oh,
This is the Cuban Missile Crisis.
right.
Kennedy is talking about everybody should read The Guns of August because it shows how the machinery starts growing. It gets to a point that it can't be stopped anymore.
No. Yeah.
And that's essentially it. Great poll, Albert. Absolutely right. That is an excellent book. I recommend it to everybody. There is a documentary on it, but the film quality is crap.
No.
It's horrible. But yeah, the book, highly recommend it. Scott, of course, is still being filtered by the NSA, which is probably what happened to me. They used a heat ray in addition to the 110 degree hell place that I'm living in. Go ahead.
No, I'm just laughing. I'm thinking, the quality of our internet connection is about the same quality as the phone lines in the trenches of World War I.
Absolutely correct. Yeah, so, I mean, essentially, the details of the plot, it ends up working out. Yeah, big surprise, it's a Hollywood movie. But the details of the battle and of the life and of the conditions were very, very good.
Yes.
But anyway, expound away.
Watch the Psalm to understand exactly what happened, and then watch 1917 to get a feel for what it was. Because all of the movies, and I love the World War I ones from the 1930s and 40s, Paths of Glory, the original All Quiet on the Western Front, which were great psychological, but they never showed you the filth that these guys lived in.
There's no way they do that.
Yeah, 1917 shows it perfectly. Watch the two movies back to back, and you'll get a good idea. And if I remember, the Somme was the worst battle of World War I.
Well, to give you an idea, it began in 1916.
Yeah.
So 1917 is still going on. They're still fighting the same damn battle over the same patch of ground that the British only ended up getting, 6 miles of.
Yeah. 4 months, 1 million casualties on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we never saw anything that bad until the Russian front of World War II.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And that was probably the lion's share of the blame should probably go to Stalin for that one. Because he was just chewing his people up.
Oh, yeah. And, the thing is that you had touched on it earlier. World War I had such an impact because during the Treaty of Versailles, Germany got raped. I mean, usually every time there was a war, it would be, okay, you owe us some money, you give us this province, we're fine. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just economically destroyed them. Mm-hmm. They took away the military. They took away their entire empire, huge swaths of land. Mm-hmm. It produced a hatred in Germany that fueled both communism and Nazi fascism. It wasn't just Hitler and them.
Yeah.
And, it eventually led to Hitler being legally given power.
Yeah.
It was World War I, and it was the defeat on the Russian front that led to the Communist Revolution that overthrew Nicholas II.
Yep.
Anybody
And-
who knows, anybody who knows the Cold War, we
Mhm.
spent the next almost, well, we still got communism running around.
Yeah, but we spent a good 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't until 89 until the Soviet Union, the
Mhm.
wall came down, and it wasn't until 91 until Russia collapsed. It just fueled 50 to 60 years of nightmare in Europe.
Here's a little funny story. On the icebreaker I served on, the polar one, we were in the Soviet Arctic
Mm-hmm.
during the Russian coup.
Oh,
Yes, when Yeltsin took over from Gorbachev. And we found out about it, I swear to God, we found out about it via the BBC.
Ah.
Because we didn't have the Soviet cover way up in the Arctic, damn near to the Arctic Circle,
Yeah.
to the pole, North Pole. But talk about some sphincter spitting diamonds. There we were, this big red monstrosity in the middle of a white wasteland
yeah.
in Soviet, territory, and there's a coup going on.
Yeah.
It's like, oops.
Well, it was funny because I was stationed with the Open Source Center, which was then FBIS. We monitored communist media to see, because the communists always would say in the media what they were planning. And my boss picked up this thing called Interfax. It was a news agency coming out of Russia. And he thought, yeah, it might be worth it. So he had it faxed to us rather than sent via electronics. When the coup took place, they took over Moscow radio, Moscow television. They took over TASS and that, Pravda. They never took over Interfax. So for the 3 days of the coup, we were the only ones reporting the facts. That tiny little bureau in the middle of Okinawa.
Holy shit.
I still remember watching Boris Yeltsin stand on that tank and telling people, if we don't stand up now, we're going to go right back to where we were.
Mm-hmm.
I admired that guy so much. But then...
Oh, yeah, Jay was a complete drunken loser, but
oh,
he
God.
did a good job.
He did a good job, If he had died at the end of that first year, he would be... that's all we'd remember.
Mm-hmm.
Now all we remember is Boris Yeltsin, 300 pounds, out in Siberia, sweating, doing the dance with the girls with the belly flop.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it did. Facebook user.
It's Zuckerberg. I'm sure it was. But yes, it did give us Hitler. And I talked about this during the last padded room. Even if there had been no Hitler, there'd have been somebody else.
Yes.
Because World War I, the end of World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, thanks to the French, and it really was the French that were the driving force behind it.
Yeah.
World War II was inevitable because it left so many issues unresolved. And it pissed off the German people, and the German people still had millions and millions of guns.
Yeah.
They were still one heavily armed country.
Yeah, and it cost a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread.
Oh, yeah, it was just ridiculous. And the French were demanding reparation payments, but then they took over the Ruhr.
The Ruhr, yeah.
And that was where all the money came from. So they demanded reparation payments and then cut off their ability to make them.
Yeah. No, it was insane. The question I always wondered, I asked myself two questions.
Mm-hmm.
What if fascism didn't come to the rise? What if the communists won? What would have happened then? You wouldn't have had Nazi Germany. You would have had Red Germany.
Mm-hmm.
would they have just quietly joined? Because the Soviet Union only came to prominence after Hitler invaded. Then they built up the huge military, and then they went after Hitler. And then while they were there, it's like, well, let's take all of Eastern Europe. And
Yeah, well, it was more complicated than that, of course.
I know, but that's but
that
if,
is the gist of it. Yeah.
but if Hitler had not invaded the Soviet Union,
Mhm.
how would history have been different? Would there have been an Eastern Europe, a communist Eastern Europe, a Cold War?
Well, there's a bit, yes, yeah. Well, either that or Patton would have gotten his wish,
Yeah.
and we'd have ended up at war with Russia as well.
Yeah.
Because the deal that Stalin cut with Hitler, the non-aggression pact,
Yeah.
gave Russia half of Poland,
Right. Yeah.
which Hitler wanted to do because he wanted a direct connection with Russian territory,
Yeah.
because he was already planning on invading them.
Oh, yeah.
But even without me, let's take Germany out of it for a moment. Another thing the Treaty of Versailles did was it ignored two of our allies, Japan and Italy.
Yeah.
The Japanese were ignored. The Italians were basically told to go pack sand. Italy, we got Mussolini. Japan, we got Tojo.
Yeah.
So the world was going to go to war again. It was pretty much guaranteed that the world was going to go to war again, with or without Hitler. Hitler and his, his cronies, whatever you want to call them, they essentially were, they turned bureaucracy and the institution of government into batshit insanity.
Well, what always got me was when I studied it, Hitler was sliding in the popularity.
Mm-hmm.
The highest he'd gotten was, I think, 33% of the vote. And then the next vote, he wound up with like 29. The Nazi party was falling apart. So Hindenburg and all the elites said, oh, let's put him in charge. We'll control him. We'll have the brown shirts. Mm-hmm. And they put him in charge. And then less than a year later, after the Reichstag fire, the Reichstag passed the Enabling Act, which gave Hitler dictatorial powers.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah. Hitler lost in popularity. The Nazis, however, gained seats.
Yes.
In the parliament or whatever.
Yes,
there was before that. In the Weimar Republic. So they had by far the largest number of votes in that governing body, which was why Hindenburg gave Hitler the nod. But Hitler was, on the one hand, you could view Hitler as a genius. And don't send me a bunch of hate mail.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I don't. There's a reason Time Magazine named him Man of the Year. This was like 1935, 1936, somewhere in there. And before the crazy really started to show. And he did rebuild the German economy. They had been absolutely decimated.
Yeah.
He created the Autobahn system.
Exactly. The German vacations and
the Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah. The one thing that always fascinated me about Hitler was Dr. Morell.
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody who doesn't know, Dr. Morell was this rat that Hitler fell in love with. And
Mhm.
I mean, he was being pumped at one time with, I think, up to 40 medications, and some of
Mhm.
these were narcotics.
Oh
And
yeah.
it screwed Hitler up. And there's a really fascinating story. I don't remember the battle, but he had to go off all the drugs to clean his system for a month or two. During those 2 months was when the Wehrmacht started to see successes in battle again, because Hitler's mind was clear. And the one thing I always wondered is, if it hadn't been for Morell, how would World War II have turned out?
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of gas
Oh, I know.
about Hitler. People not being able to understand how Hitler made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, he was a junkie.
Yeah.
He was a junkie on one hand. On the other hand, he had absolute power,
Yeah.
and absolute power corrupts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
It,
no one would have the balls to stand up to him and say,
Nobody.
everyone who did, the only
Oh
one
yeah.
who the only one who got away with it was Albert Speer those last month.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, that's
I
it.
have my own opinions of Speer. So. But
Yes.
I always joked with myself, wouldn't it have been a great coup if Morell was actually working for MI6?
That would have been.
Yeah.
MI6 were some sneaky bastards.
Oh my God. They were
Yeah.
they were brilliant. Bodyguard of Lies. Best book I ever read about espionage. Yep. I mean, the British just pulled one over. And the other thing about the book was they had the Enigma code. They knew everything the ground forces were going to do.
Yep.
And they had to allow defeats so the Germans wouldn't get upset. Yeah. And the funny thing was, there was one battle after America entered the war when Hitler said, I don't trust this system. We're going to do it all ground forces. All orders are going to be hand carried. That battle was
Battle of the Bulge.
The Battle of the Bulge, where the British and the Americans got caught with their pants down because we had no clue what was coming.
Yeah. And again, that was a mistake by Hitler.
Yeah.
His generals wanted to. They all thought that going all the way to Antwerp was a bad idea. It was going too far. They kept offering a shorter solution, which was dumb. In the second place, they attacked the Americans, thinking they would divide, the Americans and the Brits, and they should have attacked Montgomery. Montgomery might have caved.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
Nope. Patton said in 3 days I'll turn 90 degrees and I'll be, he promised to take Bastogne back by Christmas, and he did.
Day after Christmas.
Was it the day after Christmas?
Day after Christmas.
Oh, day after Christmas.
Yeah. And then of course there's General McAuliffe.
Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah, you just no, the American Army. There's a reason that Eisenhower was in charge.
Yeah.
It's because by far the American Army put way more than anybody else into that war.
Well, I can't remember. I think it was the Soviet. Their manual said the worst enemy is the Americans because we don't follow a manual. We just ad hoc it. Once the battle begins, it's the guy in the field that says, yeah, screw this. This is what we need to do to win. And you can't, as the enemy, counter that.
Yeah, you can't. Plus, if you add the fact that we had mechanized warfare down.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the Germans had a great mechanized forces.
Yeah.
What they didn't have, and the Americans did have, is so many normal soldiers who were mechanics.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody
Yeah.
could basically turn a wrench on a Jeep.
Yeah.
And you had maybe a quarter of the Germans that could
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. And,
So,
so many of the guys who fought in World War II were kids growing up in the Depression.
yeah.
They were used to sleeping out in the cold. They were used to sleeping in the back of their car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Although I don't think they're quite as used to
No,
what
not
they
yeah.
ended up dealing with, but yeah, exactly. So he'd have been better off hitting Montgomery instead
Yeah.
of us.
Well, he would have been much better off to just take everything. Well, he wouldn't have done it. But if they just took everything from the West, shifted it to stop Stalin, and opened everything up.
Well, I mean, they could have even retracted the lines
Yeah.
to shore up their defenses. But he didn't do that. He ordered no retreat. You cannot retreat. You're
Well, I
not
mean,
going to move an inch.
and I remember a lot of the generals during those last months were like, surrender, open up the line. Don't tell Hitler. Let the Americans, let the British take Berlin first. And we got to the Elbe and we stopped and waited.
Mm-hmm. Well, not going after Berlin, that was Eisenhower's decision.
Right.
And I think it was the right one.
Yeah.
Because Berlin, while a prestige target, wouldn't have ended the war.
No.
You had
And
to
we would have had to
destroy-
give it back anyways.
Yeah, you had to destroy the German army.
Yeah.
And that's what Eisenhower and the Western Allies did.
Yeah.
Is they destroyed that army.
Yeah. And Eisenhower turned south because he thought that there was that Alpine Redoubt, which turned out to be false.
True. But you can't, I mean, the SS,
Yeah.
those guys were fanatics.
Oh, yeah. But
Almost, but
Patton wanted Berlin. We should have let him take it.
I know. But, well, yeah, but did we really want that many casualties?
No.
Now, the Soviets ended up with a shitload of casualties because Stalin didn't care.
No.
Send them in, send them in, send them in, send them in.
Yeah.
And I think, Eisenhower was a little bit like that. What they did with the Repel-Deppel was the replacement system that they had that was horrible. But he'd have balked at that many casualties. Yes, the Soviet army took Berlin at a horrible cost.
Yeah. And at a horrible cost to all the Berliners that stayed in the city that weren't allowed to sneak out.
Yeah, that was it. They weren't allowed to sneak out.
Oh, yeah.
People who tried were getting shot.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, again, was just insanity.
It was. It was insane. I mean, if you've not seen the movie, best movie about the fall of Berlin, Downfall.
Yes.
It shows how insane it was in the bunker. The sucking up to Hitler in the last couple of days. And
as he's ordering, attacks from forces that no longer exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it also tells you what was going on above the street where 13-year-old boys and girls, were given one Panzerfaust and told, stop that Soviet army division.
Yeah, exactly. It was sheer lunacy. But in a sense, it had to happen because Germany had to be brought to its knees. It had to be. Not doing so at the end of World War I, because they never invaded Germany in World War I. Well,
no,
the Russians kind of did, but it didn't last long.
No.
So Germany was intact. The people hadn't really experienced it. In fact, this was the thing about World War One and why the Germans thought they got stabbed in the back at the end of the war, because they thought they were winning.
Yeah.
And it was because the German government was blowing sunshine up their asses.
Oh yeah.
Was telling them, oh yeah, it was a great victory, great victory. No.
Yeah.
And meanwhile they just lost 50,000 people.
Yeah.
50,000 soldiers.
And the German people never, like, they were shocked when the war ended and they were the losers, and everybody started to blame, all those communists. Who's a communist? All those Jewish people. Set the groundwork for World War.
Interestingly enough,
Yeah.
Jews fought for Germany in the First World War.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were given the Iron Cross.
Yeah.
It was only
Yeah.
later in that.
And it was even during the first few years of the Nuremberg Doctrine that those that were excused from it were World War One veterans who had won medals
At first.
of Jewish descent.
Yeah, at first.
At first.
At first. Then that kind of ended. Yeah, but I highly recommend people study the First World War.
Yes.
Because not many people know about. Everybody knows about the Second World War.
Yeah.
Not many know about the First World War. But I mean, there's the old saying: "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it," and it's very, very true.
Very accurate. Because everything the Germans mastered in World War One. Well, actually, the British and the Americans had the better tanks, but the Germans picked up on it. Machine guns, aircraft, U-boats.
U-boats. Oh, yes.
They just used those in World War II, and
we hadn't learned from it in World War One.
No.
The Lusitania.
Yeah. I mean,
that was a submarine.
For God's sakes, we thought battleships were still going to win the war right up until Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you see it today. And I have to be careful about this because I don't want Dee to kick my ass. But you see it today with, I don't want to debate on this, please, no arguments. I'm just laying this out as a fact. You look at something like critical race theory, which to a certain extent has much to do about nothing. However, essentially, if you want to generalize it, you have one side saying that everything about us is bad. You have the other side saying, no, don't show the bad stuff. Show only the good stuff. Be proud of being an American. But neither one of those is right.
Yeah.
Because unless we study the warts,
yes,
unless we study, I mean, you look at, everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Everybody does. And in our culture, making mistakes is bad. It makes you a loser, which is horseshit.
Yeah.
It is. Everybody makes mistakes. And if you look at our history, you can point to that and say, those guys made mistakes. They made big mistakes. Look at what they accomplished.
Yeah.
In spite of those mistakes.
Well, that's like one of the things that bothers me is how the founding fathers, like Jefferson, are castigated for putting slavery in the Constitution. But if they didn't, none of the southern states would have gone along with it. So we would have been 13 tiny little states that the British just would have eventually taken back.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure the British don't want us back anymore, especially after we gave them Megan.
That's true. But they're having problems of their own.
Oh, yeah. But no, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Look at history from the concept of when it took place.
Yes.
Slavery today is an abomination.
Yes.
You know, we would never do it today. We've evolved 200 plus 200 and almost
Mhm.
250 years since the Constitution.
Hmm. And they still look at what those slave owners created.
Mm.
They put us on this grand experiment.
Yeah.
Now, it took the incredible amount of blood of the Civil War
Yeah.
to finally work out the kinks in the system.
Yeah.
But we did it,
Yeah.
which no other nation in history has ever done.
Yeah.
We created a government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Yeah.
But it wasn't perfect then.
No.
It's not perfect now.
No.
Which that was the truly brilliant thing our founding fathers did.
And we're the only nation to have staged a revolution, got rid of a bad government, and survived for almost 250 years
Yes.
as a democracy.
Yes, exactly.
Or as a republic, if you're going to be technical.
Yes.
About it.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. And that has a lot to do with the most brilliant thing that they did when they created the Constitution. They knew it wasn't perfect. So they gave us the ability to change it, to adapt it.
Yep.
You know, you hear a lot of, I've heard this a lot over the last few years. The Constitution is written in stone. Bullshit. It's not. It was designed to be changed.
Mhm.
It was designed to allow us to adapt.
Yeah.
Damn it, we better start adapting.
But do it smart.
Do it
Because
smart.
I mean, look at the 18th and the 19th Amendments.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, the 18th Amendment was a real winner. Yeah, let's take
Yeah.
let's take away everybody's booze. Let me introduce you to a guy named Al Capone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was no such thing as a speakeasy, or, a rum running.
No.
So.
Yeah, it was legislating morality.
Yeah.
Which you cannot do.
And again, for everybody that stands out there today and says, "Oh my God, we're in the worst time we could ever be," look at it from 1918 right up until World War II. We had the worst economy the United States ever had. We had prohibition. We had the forming of the Hayes Committee, where there was a government body saying what you could and could not watch on movies.
Yeah. You had the House Un-American Activities.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, I've always kind of wondered about that. It says in the Constitution, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, but it says you can believe what you want, you can think what you want, you can speak about the things you think and the things you believe. And yet, the House Un-American Activities Committee, you can't talk about you can't be a communist. Yeah. Communism is stupid, particularly the Soviet variety.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's pointless. It's economically unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we have to stop people from being it.
No, and how many? There was a name. I remember there was a director. I can't remember his name. It was a code name for communist directors who were blackballed, who took on this name and would do the movie.
Yeah.
You know what the name? You know what I'm talking about. I can't think of the name.
I can't think of his name now.
We're seeing the same thing today. You can say anything you want if you're to the far left. But if you're on the far right and you post a photograph of Full Metal Jacket, you get Facebook banned.
Well, but it goes both ways.
It's going to switch.
You could say whatever the hell you want as long as we agree with you.
Yeah.
If we don't agree with you, you suck.
Yeah. And it's eventually going to swing in the other direction.
It goes, yes. Well, that's the problem. Is I call it Sir Isaac Newton's second law of motion
Yeah.
for humanity. It's for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So
Yeah.
right now, things are completely at the extremes. That's because one side will say one thing, so the other side says the exact opposite. And
Yeah.
it keeps getting farther and farther and farther apart.
What just drives me nuts is okay, so, and I'm not taking any sides, but like one
Mhm.
party will spend 4 years or 8 years bashing a candidate.
Yeah.
And then the next
It's the NSA again, Scott. They're cutting you off.
party
that's
comes
just
in, rather than the next party say, we're going to be better than that.
Mhm.
And bring the conversation back to a normalcy, they outdo the first group. So
Yes.
then when that party gets in, they outdo the second group.
Yes. Yes.
And now you've got what you got today, where it's
Mhm.
just, God forbid, if you open your mouth and say anything, you're banned.
Yeah, I know. And it's Shelby Foote, the great Civil War historian.
Yes. Yeah.
Said the one thing that we've always been best at is compromise.
Yeah.
Until now.
No, yeah.
There is no compromise. There is no more middle.
No.
The middle doesn't exist. And that's where
No.
things get done, which is why absolutely fuck all is getting done
Yeah.
in Washington these days. And it doesn't matter what party's in charge.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree.
No difference.
No, I mean, I'm not like one of these get rid of all the Democrats and get rid of all the Republicans. If you've been in Congress for more than 5 years, get rid of them.
Get rid of them.
I mean, there are so many politicians that are still there that some I voted for when I voted the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the other day, I looked at him and was like, oh my God, that guy is still, in the House of Representatives.
I know. I know. He has to take meds to keep the Alzheimer's at bay.
It's like, I wish we had more Trumans.
Yes.
He came in.
Yes.
He didn't even want to be a senator, but he did it because he felt it was he didn't want to be vice president. And I think he was a damn good president.
I've said it before. I think he was the last true statesman.
Yeah.
That we've had in charge.
Yeah.
And nobody since then.
No.
I mean, Eisenhower was a good organizer. Kennedy gave us hope.
Mm.
Johnson, no. Johnson. Then, of course, there was Nixon.
And then Ford. I mean, what? He had like 2 years of picking up the pieces.
Yeah, Ford couldn't get out of his own way. Carter never had a chance.
No.
Never had a chance.
No.
And then Reagan, well.
I'm a huge fan of Reagan. I like Reagan. I think he did a lot of good.
He did a lot of good. He also did a lot of bad.
And then there were the two.
They all have.
Then there were the two Bushes, which.
Yeah. And then there was Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton, I feel bad for. I think Bill Clinton would have done much better after he lost those midterms when he realized he went to the center. And some of the great things he did with Congress, got rid of welfare, all that. But after the Monica Lewinsky thing, he just, I was waiting. I watched him the night he made the speech, and I was waiting for, my fellow Americans, I'm sorry, I'm human, I had an affair. Have you seen Hillary? I'm making amends with my family. I apologize to Monica, but if you think I shouldn't be president, I'll resign. He could have kicked puppies across the White House lawn and had a 90+ approval rating. But, instead it was.
Well, the reason that the Republicans went after him so hard, they did, I mean, Trump talks about the witch hunt.
Yeah.
Whitewater was a witch hunt. They just started throwing everything against the wall to see what would stick.
Yeah.
And the reason they did it is because he was a master politician.
Yes, he was.
He was better at the game than they were, and it pissed them off.
The biggest bitch I had about the Republicans was, really, you're gonna bring him on trial for perjuring when he said, I never had sexual relations for that woman. Fine. If you're gonna bring him up for perjury, he perjured himself. Remove him. But don't bring him up on charges of perjury and then not vote him out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like bringing somebody up on charges for murder and then just saying, "Yeah, but you're a good guy. We're not gonna go through with it." I mean, you know, it was stupid. They destroyed themselves.
Yes, and it's been going downhill ever since.
Oh God, yes.
I'd say, I mean, I'm old.
Yeah.
So I've been watching this stuff for quite a long time. I'd say the downward slide started about 95. About the time of the contract on America. I mean, for America. Ever since, it's been going downhill.
I would say 98.
Thereabouts.
You know,
yes.
the whole thing, I think the whole Al Gore, George Bush debacle about, you know, counting chads and I got 8 flags, well, I got 16.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then after that, it was just the only president, I know I'm going to get hated for this. I liked Trump for one major reason. Mm-hmm. He was not a politician.
Well,
he was a multi-billionaire. He did this. Yeah. It was like a hold my beer moment. And he pissed off everyone in Washington. And that's why I liked him.
And everywhere around the world. So
but let's be fair. He did get some of the Middle Eastern countries to recognize Israel. Mm-hmm. You know, he did act. He calmed down North Korea for a while by meeting with them. That's all Kim Jong-un wanted. You know, I mean, that's just what I liked about it. Washington and the media hated him because he wasn't one of them.
But, you know, regardless of what you think of Trump, fundamentally, the fact he wasn't a politician was the biggest problem. I think he was the mayor of some city in Ohio, I believe. And he ran with the slogan that I'm not a politician. Elect me because I'm not a politician. Well, he got into office and he found he couldn't get anything done precisely because he wasn't a politician. Unfortunately, politics is how it works.
I watched a few months ago Idiocracy, and the really sad thing was it's like, oh my God, this is a premonition.
I know. The triumph of stupidity. Yeah. Anyway, on that note, now that we've devolved entirely.
Yeah, we went down so many rabbit holes, even the rabbits can't find us.
I know. But sorry about all the technical glitches.
Yeah.
Blame the NSA.
Yes.
It's their fault.
Yeah.
Next time, our subject will be Nazis and the occult in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm. The reality versus how they're portrayed in movies.
Exactly. So you know there's going to be some cool movies.
Or weird time travel books by unknown authors.
Exactly. When does Maria Doria come out?
Probably mid-August. I'm almost done with I'm going to send you a couple of notes to ask some questions. I should be done by the end of July, but I'm not going to get the cover until maybe early August.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I went ahead and set up pre-order for Full Metal Zombie, even though I'm not done with it yet,
Yeah.
just to give me a deadline to work against.
Yeah. Well, the person that Warren Design does my Tatiana novels, the poor woman is just booked solid. So she's going to fit me in at the end of July because she's doing a special made cover for me. So she's going to do it, send it to me. We'll tweak it. But right now she said she's just swamped. But I want her. She's done 2 great book covers. I want her to do the 3rd one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the guy who did your Operation Majestic, awesome book cover.
Yeah. Yeah, he also did the Shattered World series. And I called him and I said, this is what I want. I sent him a picture of one of the mantis aliens. It was a boring picture. And he said, can I play with it? I said, zap it up any way you want. And when he came back and sent me that cover, it was like I was like a little kid at Christmas.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, thank you folks for chiming in.
Yes.
Facebook user, great job. Albert, great poll. There's all sorts of books out there about the First World War. There's all sorts of documentaries out there about the First World War. Watch them. Go on YouTube.
Yeah.
Type in WW1.
It's a fascinating period of history. It really is.
It is. It is. And it just shows you just how inhuman human beings can be.
Yeah.
So until next time, folks, I'm Jeff Thompson. He's Scott Baker.
Scott Baker.
See you next time.
All right.